Hi, I'm Alex Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. I guess, we're going to talk about about how, jobs are not really needed. The part of this lockdown, people assume that millions and millions of people losing their job would have some immaterial impact on the fortunes of the economy as a whole. But no, it only affects the serfs, the plebs, the peasants. As a matter of fact, it's a great opportunity. If you're in the banking elite, again, you see stocks trading higher and bank stocks zooming higher. Workers aren't needed. Taxes aren't needed. When you can money printer go burr, you don't need that stuff.
Max, we've talked about the Cantillon effect for the past few years here, and that's when money printer, anybody close to the money printer, they get it first. The oligarchs, the kleptocrats, the kakistocracy, they get the money first. They get all the benefits of 0% interest rates. And the further away from the money printer you go, the more encumbered with debt and grotesqueness and toxicity of all the fraud that went before it. So we're seeing this unfold around the world, but I do want to make some notes about the set. We have a palm tree now in the background because we're, feeling like summer's coming on, and that might be some sort of hope in the future about this COVID-19 global lockdown. We have a finance and investment handbook here that we will need in a few moments to explain negative rates or negative prices on options. But I do want to also say hi to Juan Montaña, because our Latin American audience, our Espanol version of Keiser Report, is like rocketing. We have so many amazing viewers there. We get constant emails, so many tweets from them. And he says, you got one new follower. I've seen like 10 of your videos so far in 1 week, and I'm delighted with your content. Greetings from Colombia.
Hola.
See, Max is learning Spanish just for you. And of course, we need it for the money printer go brrr, because that is the rolling R's. But I want to show you something about this Cantillon effect. And in fact, the Cantillonian elite. There's the elite of Cantillon around the world. They're the same class of people who get the money printing first. And then what do? They run away with it at the first sign of trouble. There's capital flight. And then we have life imitating art. I'm going to go back to 2008, Max. This is Alex Schaefer's Chase burning. This is a part of JP Morgan Chase, the biggest bank in America. And this was a metaphor for the banks being responsible, for financialization being responsible for our economy and our societies burning down.
So true. That is part of the global insurrection against banker occupation, right? That's been going on now for 11, 12 years as growing skirmishes coalesce to a global movement, because there is only one issue that anybody concerned about, society should be thinking about, and that is the Cantillons.
The Cantillonian.
Right? Not the Cantillonians. They live in Spain. Right? And the Indignatos. They also live in Spain. Sure. These are the Cantillons.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds, they're gross. They're a gross population of grubbers.
Well, we're seeing their impact in Lebanon. And this scene I'm going to show you, we obviously do not condone any burning down of banks, literally. But I'm showing you that an important moment that is essentially the Cyprus of this round of global financial collapse. And this is an image from Tripoli in Lebanon. Banks set on fire in Lebanon as currency crashes in hyperinflation event. And we're going to show this little clip of a video with a guy we put a Bitcoin over his face. Spookelnot online, he posted this. And this is a video of a guy watching the bank on fire, burning down, and then calmly walking away. And I think that's really important as a metaphor for what we have to look at with this global situation, because we have financial collapse, we have economic collapse, and we have to stop going, oh my God, we need to save it. We need to save it. Do anything, Fed. Do anything, Treasury. We need to just calmly walk away and let that system die and move over calmly to our new Bitcoin, gold, hard money, the hardening. We need to just step away calmly.
The question is, what makes more sense? Burning a bank or buying Bitcoin? So if you burn a bank, they'll just build a new bank. So it doesn't really have much impact. But if you buy Bitcoin, you are putting the banks out of business. You're putting the Cantillans out of business. You're putting fractional reserve bankers out of business. You're putting the central bankers out of business if you buy Bitcoin. That's why every Spanish-speaking person in the world, every person in the world, in every country in the world needs to be buying Bitcoin as a way to opt out of fraud, opt out of the Cantillans, opt out, just opt out. And well, more and more people are doing that. If you look at the Bitcoin adoption charts in countries like Argentina, they're zooming higher. Brazil, zooming higher. Argentina, zooming higher. Mexico, zooming higher. Places like the Bitcoin Embassy Club in Mexico City attracts huge crowds because people realize that their only hope out of this mess is through Bitcoin.
Well, of course, not everybody has opted out yet. And, they didn't learn the lesson of 2013 when the Cypriots had a bail-in, their wealth got confiscated. Argentina in 2001, they had the same situation. Many Argentinians had savings in dollars, in US dollars, and the government seized it overnight. The central bank of Argentina seized it overnight and devalued they basically took 75% of their US dollars. Here in Lebanon, you've seen the same thing. Lebanon cities erupt against economic hardship. One protester killed in Tripoli. Banks have been a target of people angered by being frozen out of their deposits. Protesters in the southern city of Sidon chanting revolution hurled petrol bombs at a central bank building and set its exterior on fire before smashing the fronts of banks. In Beirut, dozens marched across the city, some wearing medical masks while chanting against the financial system and shouting for more Lebanese to join. Later, crowds hurled stones towards security forces positioned in front of the central bank. So at least they're identifying the underlying Cantillon effect. The cause of a lot of our economic crisis around the world is that there is a select group of people who get free, fresh, 0% interest rate cash. They're allowed capital flight. All of their cash got to be taken out of the country. Any sucker, at the poker table, this global neoliberal Cantillon poker table, they get trapped. All their money is trapped inside the bank and they can't get it out.
Yeah, but I would re-emphasize that burning a bank is relatively ineffective, right? I mean, you could rip up lots of fiat money. I do that all the time. When I go to events, I rip up fiat money all the time. I've ripped up probably $50,000, $60,000 worth of fiat money over the years. It's all garbage. Compared to the Bitcoin, it's literally garbage. It's like, the US dollar, when you compare it to Bitcoin, it's like the Venezuelan bolivar littering the streets. When you have Bitcoin go from 9 million%, when it goes from $1 to $10,000, $20,000, you can literally use any fiat money in the world to wipe yourself after you use the toilet, because that's the only thing you could possibly use it for. Fiat is only good for caca-poo-poo. There is absolutely no use for it. Stop burning banks. Just buy Bitcoin and let Satoshi do what he's going to do anyway. Just don't get so dramatic.
I might add that here they're chanting revolution, and that system of fiat and Cantillon effect, like the Cantillon elite, that is what John F. Kennedy would have said. Basically, revolution happens if you don't allow a peaceful way out. Well, Bitcoin is a peaceful resolution to this problem. And at least these protesters in Lebanon are like in a very hyper-partisan constructed. It's a system that is constructed to be hyper-partisan by the imperial powers that left, essentially. They are united across all sects, whatever religion, whatever group you're from, that they're saying, like, the problem is this fiat central banking system. It's not individual partisans, like, how they do it in America, where principles and these notions and ideals of natural law, of our rights of man, of our individual sovereignty go out the window when it's partisan, when it's red team, blue team, Republican, Democrat. We see that with the issue of this assault that is alleged by some woman against Joe Biden. And of course, the entirety of half the population no longer cares, and they'll champion that. So this happens you could see that in an economic and financial way, just like on the left wing in America, if it's Larry Summers doing this plunder and feeding cash, or Tim Geithner feeding cash to their elite, then they're happy and that doesn't matter. And it's the principle, there's no principles involved. The same thing, they're against, anybody on the right or Steve Mnuchin doing this stuff.
All you need for proof that we've entered a new era of distraction is the Pentagon's report that they released a video of aliens. And they released this video and said, look, we've been sitting on this for a while and we found aliens. And the response by the news and by the collective media outlets around the world was a big yawn. Like, we're totally busy down here with other stuff. We don't care about aliens anymore. That's so 1950s. We're totally distracted by the mesmerization and hypnosis of the fake crises caused by money printing that we didn't even notice when the aliens arrived. That's how crazy things are. But again, don't burn a bank, chill and buy Bitcoin.
And I guess before we move on from this notion of financialization and how it's broken all sorts of laws of physics, we must point out why we have this book, Finance and Investment Handbook.
Why do we have this book?
Because we had a small print, just briefly, in the options market, a put option traded at a negative price. So how is that possible? What does this handbook tell us, Max?
Oh, right. This is the Finance and Investment Handbook from my library, one of the many, 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 many books I have on finance. And there's nothing in here that talks about trading a put option on a negative commodity price, right? Because it doesn't exist. This is an alien. This is like the Pentagon seeing alien life forms suddenly, right? This was an alien life form, was a put option on a negative commodity price. It's never appeared. It's never happened before. It's never covered. It's in no textbook. Just like negative interest rate is in no economics textbook going back 300 years. You'll never find that because it's an aberration. We live in a remarkable time because you can trade any phantasmagorical nonsense that you can imagine over having 5 or 6 cocktails at Harry's Hanover in New York City's Wall Street area and come back to the office and decide, hey, let's trade that and use it as collateral for $1 billion loan to ourselves. And then we're going to buy $500 million yacht. And then we're going to get the Fed to pay for it. And then everyone else is going to die. And we don't care because we're crazy psychos. And that's, unfortunately, the reality.
And in the last 30 seconds here, I want to talk about the peaceful way of walking away from the system and letting it burn down. Shanghai gold boss wants super sovereign currency for post-crisis times. The president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange called for a new super sovereign currency to offset the global dominance of the U.S. dollar, which he predicted would decline long-term while gold prices rally. He sees that the future global trade needs a super sovereign currency system, which no single country has the power to freeze the international assets of another country. And this is exactly why you see those protesters in Lebanon burning down banks, is because their assets have been seized essentially by this corrupt system. Here he's saying our global trade, all these imbalances, all this Cantillon effect, all this unrest, all these constant boom and bust where wealth constantly gets created and thrown to a certain group of people. This is all caused by the U.S. dollar system.
As I predicted a long time ago, China's moving away from the dollar. They're moving toward a hard currency. They're going to use a cryptocurrency. They've already announced that now. And next thing they're going to announce is that it's going to be backed in part or entirely by gold, as I said. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Nick Giambruno. He's a geopolitical analyst who is currently in Argentina. Nick, welcome.
Great to be here, Max.
Now, Argentina, like Lebanon, is experiencing a currency crisis. Both countries were already facing economic collapse before the coronavirus. Now, lockdowns have caused more economic chaos. So tell us what's going on in Argentina, Nick.
Inflation is running out of control. The peso is headed towards zero, which is not a surprise to anybody familiar with Argentina. So even before the coronavirus hit, Argentina was in for some serious economic troubles. And just by way of comparison, I know you and Stacy came down here in December, and the currency has lost, about half of its value in just a few months since. So it's headed for another one of its sort of perennial financial crises.
Some are claiming Argentina is the next Venezuela. But other than the hyperinflation, Argentina seems to have a far more diverse economy. Both socialist and neoliberal administrations have encountered the same capital flight and economic catastrophe. What keeps going wrong, in your opinion, Nick?
Everything keeps going wrong. Argentina has an abysmal tax system, an abysmal regulation system. It's impossible to do business here. That's why capital is leaving. But Argentina also has a strong underground economy, which is actually, contrary to what many people believe, is a very good thing. It gives Argentina resilience to get past an economic crisis.
Argentina was the first junk-rated country to sell the so-called century bond, raising $2.75 billion at a 7.9% yield in June of 2017. It matures in 2117, but Argentina will probably go bust at least 5 times before then. So what's your thoughts on what's next?
The whole situation is a giant farce and is an indication of the central bank manipulation of interest rates, which are, very important. They're not just very important. Interest rates are the most important prices in all of the market. So when you have the central bank manipulating, you have a Politburo of central planners manipulating the most important price in the whole economy, you get enormous distortions. So what you this is a perfect example of an enormous distortion. Argentina issuing 100-year bonds. And not just 100-year bonds. It was oversubscribed. So you had investors piling over each other to lend this government money, which is completely ridiculous. But it's only because of the overall manipulation of interest rates lower than they normally would be that these investors were starved for yield. So the whole thing's a joke. I mean, it barely lasted a few years before they're going to default again. So to be honest, I don't feel bad for the people. They get exactly what they deserved by investing in Argentina's 100-year bonds. And I hope Argentina defaults on it. And they should teach people a lesson to lend these governments money like this.
As we know, what happens is vulture capitalists like Paul Singer, they come into the story, they buy up the government bonds, and then they commit, brazen acts of financial misdeeds. It seemed to be in cahoots with the government. I don't know how anyone could separate the Argentine government from Paul Singer or any of these other crooks. But in 2001, they actually just stole people's money through confiscations in Argentina. Do you think they'll do that again? And are people preparing with Bitcoin, or are they going to let themselves be ripped off again?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen again. But first, I would say that what happened. What you're describing is that Argentines it was something called the corralito, where Argentines had bank accounts denominated in U.S. dollars, and they woke up one day to find out that their dollar accounts had been forcibly converted to pesos, but at a terrible rate. And let me just say, this has happened in the U.S. Something like this has happened in the U.S. When you think of the gold confiscation that FDR did in the 1930s, that was basically a corralito that happened in the U.S. Americans went to bed one night thinking their dollars were worth, an ounce of gold was worth $20.67. And then they woke up the next morning finding out that the government had revalued it. And in effect, they took something where a dollar was worth about 1.5 grams of gold. And then the next morning they woke up and the dollar is now worth 0.88 grams of gold. It was a 40% devaluation. So the same things happened in the U.S. It's just a little bit of a different story. But going back to your question, yes, it is going to happen again in Argentina, probably soon, because the currency is just losing value rapidly, and the government is going to look to grab as many dollars and other assets as it can. And to your other part, unfortunately, not a critical mass of Argentines are picking up on Bitcoin. A lot of them are, and relatively speaking, it has a higher adoption rate. But this is where you talked about the vultures and the IMF coming in and really dictating what's going on here. Look, Argentina is going to have an economic collapse. That's baked into the cake. So what comes after that is uncertain. So as I see it, the Argentines have three choices. They can go back running to the IMF and be slaves of the IMF. They can go to the Chinese and be slaves of the Chinese, or this is going to give them a chance to adopt Bitcoin. It really will give them a chance to adopt Bitcoin as to base their economy around. There used to be a saying about 100 years ago. It's a joke now. There used to be a saying, "Rich as an Argentine," because Argentina used to be on a par with the United States as a rich country 100 years ago. So if Argentina adopted Bitcoin, and this is a fertile country for Bitcoin adoption for a lot of reasons, but if after this next inevitable collapse, instead of turning to the IMF, instead of turning to the Chinese, the Argentines turn to Bitcoin, that rich as an Argentine saying, it won't be a joke anymore. It could become another reality.
I mean, Argentinians need to remember, as well as the Brazilians and the Colombians and the Mexicans, that Bitcoin is unconfiscatable, right? I mean, you talked about the Corralito in 2001. The government just basically stole your money, which is similar to what happened in the 30s with FDR. The government just came in and confiscated your gold, confiscated your money. So we now have something that's unconfiscatable, and that, of course, is Bitcoin. So any Argentinian that has money outside of Bitcoin, expect it to get stolen. All right? So yes. if you're an Argentinian or a Mexican or a Colombian or a Brazilian, if you have any money outside of Bitcoin, expect it, 100% guaranteed, it's going to get stolen by the government. That's just life, baby. You know, suck it up, as Charlie Munger would say. But, you know, it's interesting here in America, currently the program is not just confiscation of wealth. I think I would compare it to a giant cram down. You know that in corporate America, when a company wants to take over another company, they can engage in a cram down where they flood the stock. They flood the company with a preferred stock, millions and millions and hundreds of millions of shares, and they take control of it that way. Here, they're doing the same thing. It's a national cram down. The Federal Reserve decides to flood 6, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 trillion dollars that they create, and they use it to take control of all the assets. All the assets are now going to a few people in the U.S. And we're becoming the so-called banana republic that we used to accuse Latin Americans of becoming. America's becoming, it's kind of a combination of Argentina in the 1970s and the Soviet Union in the 1950s. When you put those two together, you end up with the United States of America and the current situation. But let's talk about what's happening in China here, Nick, because I know you have far-reaching interests. The president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange is calling for a new super sovereign currency. Your thoughts on whether this could help imbalance in the global economy, Nick?
Anything that puts gold closer to its proper role, which is to say the center of the global monetary system, is a good thing. And yes, that's a great thing. But just stepping back to what you were talking about before, what's the common denominator in all those examples you just laid out? It's a fiat money system and a central banking system that enables all of that. So when you have Bitcoin, when you have honest, hard money, it prevents all of the frauds and scams and swindles you just mentioned. So yes, China introducing gold into a more prominent role in the global economy is a step in the right direction. I'd like to see more gold, more Bitcoin as the base of the global financial system. It will really help to inhibit all of the fraud and financial engineering and scams that's going out there that is made possible only by central banks and fiat money.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just, I don't understand why none of these Latin American countries figures out that they could become a superpower simply by dropping the dollar and going to Bitcoin. I mean, are they that dumb, Nick?
Yes, they are that dumb. And that's the problem, because if they were smart, they wouldn't wait until a crisis to consider this option. They would adopt it immediately. But that's not reality. What's going to likely happen, and Argentina probably will be the first one, is that it will take a crisis, it will take a total currency and economic collapse for them to even consider it. And even then, they might not choose to go down that path. They might choose to go back to the IMF. Let me just say something about the IMF. as somebody who supports a non-intervention, and the IMF is just basically a tool that the foreign policy tool that the U.S. uses to meddle in other countries. So as somebody who supports a non-interventionist foreign policy and Austrian economics, I think the IMF should not only be abolished and disbanded immediately, I think salt should be sown into the soil, the psychological soil, so that a copycat can never emerge. That being said, there is a chance the Argentines could go running to the IMF again, but there's also a chance they could go to Bitcoin instead. And I really hope they choose Bitcoin, because it is going to take a collapse for them to reconsider. They're the closest to the collapse, and they're also their economy is geared towards Bitcoin adoption, because they have this massive underground economy and underground foreign exchange network that basically everybody uses here. That can be very easily retooled to use Bitcoin instead of dollars, instead of euros.
Great point, Nick. Argentina already has a huge underground economy. Adoption of Bitcoin would be easy. All right, Nick, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks, Max.
All righty, that's going to do it for this episode of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Nick Giambruno. If you'd like to catch us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.